Well, I think the storyteller has always been around as a poet. But my approach to poetry is it has to tell a story to me, for me. This is not other poets. I'm not trying to give you my technique. I'm only telling you my technique. I'm not asking you to endorse it or anything. But I search in my poetry for the story or the great hook. You know, like my poetry when I talk about when the 90s came and I go through the 90s and then my poem like now is new, now is new, now is new. That became a hook and I look for that hook and because that hook keeps you it keeps you in continuity with the thought that the poet is trying to give to you. Now, like I say, all the great poets, they may not agree with me, but this is my process. I'm not asking anybody to adapt it or anything. I'm never the satellite of another's realities. I have my own. And the the greatest teachers to me were not in a school. They were in the what I call SWU, SideWalk University. Many of the great lessons that I learned in life when I was a young man. Um, there was many people, many African Americans who couldn't read or write in that era, in the 50s and 60s. And then everybody began to become literate. But um, I respected, like, I had a friend, he was called Creeper. And Creeper was a dope dealer. And I used to ride with him sometime. We became great friends. And he taught me patience. He taught me the value of patience. He would always drive slow. And he'd always walk slow. And he always moved slow. As I said, some called him Creeper, some called him Brothers, some called him Mac, some called him Mac the Knife. And he was my closest friend. And I would ride with him, sometimes as he did his work. So one day we were in the middle lane, and cars were just turning left, and we were sitting there for about 3 or 4 minutes waiting to do this left turn. And I turned to him and I said, "Man, can't you just go around?" Because we were going straight, we wasn't turning. And he looked over at me and he said, "Bruh, I never rush." He said, "Because I don't know where I'm rushing to. I'm doing wrong. I don't know if I'm rushing to prison. I don't know if I'm rushing to get killed by one of these people out here in the ghetto. Um, and I never rush. I take my time because I don't know where I'm rushing to." I learned that was a great lesson for me in life from a guy who could barely read and write, but he knew how to maneuver the ghetto. And everybody kind of loved him. As I said, some called him Brother, some called him Mac the Knife, because he always had to have a Cadillac, old or new. But that was my partner, Mac. And from these guys, as I told you earlier, my stepfather, he couldn't read or write, but I learned so much from him. My closest friend, um, who I remember one day, we would always sit around and question the hustlers about things that they were doing in the street and about being larcenists. And my friend told me, I said, "Man, why are we sitting around listening to these cats talk about larceny and these things that they do to survive in the street?" He said, Tony, that's what they called me at that time. He said, "Bruh," he said, "I'm not learning this to do it. He said, I'm learning it to keep it off of me, so I'd recognize it when I see it. And those were cats who couldn't read or write. That's where I got most of my lessons on life, watching them maneuver through the ghetto. They were real hustlers. They weren't the type that, was just playing it for a record like a lot of these youngsters are doing. They never were real hustlers because they, as I said, a poet never writes for applause. As I said before, a poet may get stoned for what he said, but he's going to say it if it's the truth. You're not going to stop him from saying the truth. He would hope that he doesn't hurt feelings. It's like that poem that I told you about when the sister stood up. I was at this club called Maverick's Flat. These were the early days when there wasn't poetry in clubs. And I did this poem. And this poem said, dig, sisters in wigs and homemade eyelashes. What's your trip? You say you black and you proud when you're in a crowd. But when you're home alone, many false things you put on. Hot fire to the brain and glued to the eyes, what's your thing? Are you ashamed of what you had when you came? When I said that, came, a wig hit me in the face. And this beautiful sister stood up with her hair all over her head. She took it off her head and threw and hit me with it. And then she proceeded to come on the stage. And she picked the wig up and came to me with tears. She was just crying. She said, I'm just as black as you. Yes, I wear a wig, but I'm just as black as you. And she started beating me with that wig. Well, I decided to not do that poem anymore. But I had already done it, and it was already a part of my resume. So I wasn't sorry that I did it, but I was sorry that I hurt her feelings. That's why I put the poem in a book and left it. But I had already written it, and I didn't feel sorry about writing it. I didn't feel anything. It was the truth to me.